we're going to jump in. We're going to talk through that today. I'm going to give you some specific things that are happening right now that are affecting the market, and some things that we're watching that are going to have a direct effect on the market. But we won't know exactly what effect they have on the market until a little bit more time progresses, but we'll be ahead of it and prepared to talk about it. So let me share my screen here, and we'll kind of walk through it together. Please use the chat box if you have questions, or if you want to make a comment, please make it there, and I may pull you into the conversation to chat through it a little bit. Can you see my PowerPoint? Is it coming across? Jackie?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, awesome. So the first thing I want to talk about is certainty versus uncertainty. If you think about it, 6 months ago, all of our clients had a lot of certainty around the market. In fact, our market had been on an upward trend for the last decade plus of continued appreciation, continued population growth, continued decrease unemployment, and most people hadn't canceled their cable subscription and were watching a lot of HGTV at the time, where they were experts in the market. They had a lot of certainty around what was going on in the market. Well, a lot's changed in the last 4 months, where a lot of people have moved from certainty to uncertainty. And I think it's a good foundation piece for our conversation to understand psychologically, what does it do for someone when they move from a place of certainty to a place of uncertainty? So I thought this graph illustrated it pretty well. If you look here on the left under certainty, people feel safe, they feel secured, they feel settled, they feel like in this constant piece of like, I'm safe, I know what's going on right now, in a place of certainty. As opposed to the other side of the equation, we look at uncertainty. If someone's living in uncertainty, they have anxiety. Are there a lot of people that are feeling anxious about the world right now? They're worried, they have doubt, they feel like they're in danger, they feel not safe. And the thing to keep in mind, when someone moves into uncertainty, generally speaking, they're going to do one of two reactions. They're going to freeze, meaning like, I'm not going to do anything because I don't know which direction to move in, or if I move in a specific direction, is it actually going to put me in a worse position than I'm currently in? So they're either going to freeze or they're going to flight. They're going to run away from it. I don't like how I'm feeling in this place of uncertainty, and I'm going to do everything I can to get away from it. So one of the things that we've got to keep in mind is the scripts in our presentation and our conversation 6 months ago was dealing with people's certainty and pulling them back to reality and re-educating them. Where now we've got to understand that our conversations now are mainly dealing with people in a place of uncertainty, and how do we bring them back to this place in the middle of they want to learn, they want a better understanding of what's going on in the market. How does it affect them? What are they experiencing in the market? What is the opportunity for them right now in the marketplace? So a good example of this right now is I Google searched, and keep in mind, this is the exact pattern that your clients go through. If they have questions around the economy, generally speaking, they're going to go to their mobile device first and ask a question. I went in and Googled US economy. Let's read some of the headlines that are coming up right now and talk about why the general public is feeling so much fear or uncertainty with what's going on. Fiscal cliffs threaten fragile U.S. recovery. U.S. economy faces significant risks, long road to recovery. U.S. bank earnings signal bad news about the U.S. economy. 1.3 million more file for unemployment, and it goes on and on and on. This is not me picking the bad headlines. This is me taking a direct screenshot of the first things that come up. Now, granted, one of the things we got to keep in mind here is this is where our clients are going for news. This is national news. Unless they get really specific with their Google search, Google doesn't naturally say, oh, Tana's in Utah, so I better give her the Utah news, unless we get really specific in the search. But this is a really broad scale, and all news mediums have an underlying motive behind it. What are they trying to sell? Good news does not sell. So they're going to be pushing the worst of what's going on in the economy, forcing people into uncertainty, because if they can get someone into uncertainty, they're gonna continue to come back for more and more bad news. Our job now is to be the sound of reason in that moment of saying, let me help you filter that data. So let's talk a little bit about that uncertainty of what people are feeling right now. So obviously this is not an inclusive list, but these are things that are going through people's minds right now. Is my job secure long-term? Is there going to be another shutdown? This is a big topic right now. As a lot of you guys know, California is already on another shutdown where all bars, all restaurants, all barbers, everything like that is closed down now. And they were anticipating this happening again in the fall, but they've accelerated it due to a spike in cases. So this is a big piece of uncertainty. Well, I'm back to work now, but how long is that going to last? What's happening to the value of my home? Is the government going to do another stimulus package? That's one thing that kept a lot of people in employment was the government stimulus package, which now the funds are exhausted there. If they don't launch another government stimulus package and there is another shutdown, the next 6 months could look significantly different than the last 4 months. So these are all things where people are sitting in uncertainty. Lastly, who's going to win the election? On top of everything else going on in the world, why don't we throw a political election on top of it that has a lot of controversy around it, right? All these things come together as a recipe for a lot of uncertainty. So here's the question and the underlying issue that I want or the theme of our conversation today is this idea of creating the path. A lot of you guys have been involved in hundreds, if not thousands between this group, thousands of real estate transactions over the last several years. The question I would ask you is this: have you ever had a client sitting at the closing table where they sign that they just sold a house where they're like, well, I don't know where I'm going to sleep tonight. No, they do a real estate transaction to get them closer to where they want to go. Well, this is a big piece of the puzzle right now. Is the reason, from my perspective, the reason that we're not seeing a spike in inventory going on right now is they don't see a path to where they want to go. Because people are frozen in uncertainty, they don't know how to discern the information to say, how do I get to where I want to go? Or based on what's going on in the world, where is it that I do want to go? So our conversation as real estate professionals, as guides through that process, has got to go beyond, I can help you fill out a contract. I can help you line up an inspector. I can help you review whether this is a good deal or not. Our conversation and our scripts have to get better to understand what is important to you. Where do you want to be in the next couple of years? Is it right for us to be talking about a real estate transaction right now? If we can ask better questions to get to that subsurface answer, we can create the path for where they want to go. And sometimes, not all the time, sometimes a real estate transaction is going to be a part of that path to get them to where they want to go. But even if you go through that process and help someone create that path or get that vision, and a real estate transaction at the moment is not part of that path, you are gaining mind share right now, which is more important than market share. The market share comes behind mind share. If you help somebody get clarity to where they want to go, and it doesn't generate a real estate transaction for now, I can guarantee you will be that person for them when they do need it, and or they will refer people to you that do need it in this moment. So I want you to keep that in mind as we have this conversation today is, how do I take this information, ask good questions, create better conversations so I can create the path for my people? So as always, the market conversation always has an element of supply and demand. So, I mean, obviously this is a very simple graph of supply and demand. Jackie, real quickly, I can't see the comment function as I've got the slide presentation going. Will you interrupt me if there's a comment that I need to address in the comment box while we're going?
Okay, we'll do that.
So supply and demand, if we look at the supply and demand graph, obviously a perfectly balanced market is where supply and demand intersect. I would think that if we were in a live classroom and I gave you the opportunity to say, tell me where we're at in this graph, I think all of us would agree that our supply is very, very low. We have low inventory right now. Yet we have a very high demand. So we're living in this graph right here of a very low supply, high demand. And statistically, I'll show you that that's true. If one thing to keep in mind with all the statistics that we talk about today is one statistic that lives on an island by itself does not tell a whole story. It's all how these statistics interact or connect with each other that tell a bigger story. A perfect example of this is if someone was at the nail salon today and they heard the person next to them talking that said, man, I've noticed that nobody's listing their house right now. There's so much fear in the market and nobody wants to sell their house. Well, they're basing that off of a true statistic of inventory is low. But what they're not looking at is the other statistics that show the reason why inventory is low is not that people don't want to sell their house or that there's not enough demand to buy the house. There's other underlying reasons. So keep in mind that your clients are drawing conclusions right now on what they believe is the reality around the market. And it's our duty, our job as their fiduciary to create the conversations of the other statistics and how they interact with what their current belief pattern is. So we're going to talk a lot about supply and demand today, but let's start talking about what is the current state of the market. So this graph here shows, the blue line shows a long-term historical trend of active listings. Now this is a snapshot of listings. The red line shows pending listings. For those of you that participated in my quarterly market update back in 2016, remember what happened here? For the first time in history, pending listings outpaced active listings. And I remember everyone in that meeting, their eyes were big like, we've never seen this before. What does this mean? Is this the end of real estate as we know it? Because we had never seen it before. Well, we kind of fell into a new pattern where every year for the next several years, pending listings outpaced active listings for a period of time, as you can see. Until 2019, we finally saw not necessarily a big drastic change, but we saw them kind of bounce off each other. And we started to think we were going to get back to a normal market where pending listings never outpaced active listings. Well, we can see here that 2020 is, again, unprecedented territory of specific things were happening. So in Salt Lake County, you can see the active listings is down 58.7% from where we were last July. That's almost 60% less inventory, less active listings than we had a year ago. But on the same side of that is pending listings are up 12%. So think about this for a second. If you looked at just active listings being down that significantly, and you would think that in a truly unhealthy market, the pending listings would have went down with it, and the pendings would have chased the prices down. Yet we'll see that even though closed units is down, active listings is down, pending units are up, we're also going to see that even in this time of uncertainty, prices are going up at a faster pace than they ever have gone before because of that downward pressure on demand. So really interesting here to say, okay, 6 active listings is down 60%, but we know that buyer demand is increasing. There's more buyer demand than there was a year ago, and there's more competition over active listings. So we have some work to do on generating some more inventory, which we're going to talk about today. So real quickly, a note, anytime you see the red graph here like this is specific to Salt Lake County through June. Anytime you see the blue, this is information provided by the Utah Association of Realtors, but they're always 1 month behind. They haven't turned out June's numbers yet, so this is up through the end of May, but it still gives a big, broad overview of what's going on, and then we'll dive into specifically Salt Lake County. By the way, if any of you are interested, I did this exact same presentation for Weber and Davis County last week. If you'd like to see those slides in addition to the slides here today, please make sure to drop your name and email address in the comment section. Jackie will gather those and we'll get you the Davis County and Weber County slides as well. So here are a couple things to look at that are interesting. Kind of confirms what we've been talking about. Year to date across the whole MLS in the state of Utah, new listings down 6.1%. In May alone, it was down 16.5%. So the reason I like to look at the year versus the last month is it will tell me, are we closing the gap or are we spreading the gap? And as of the end of May, we were still spreading that gap. June, we're starting to make up June, we made up some progress. In July, we're making up some progress on that as well. But it's interesting to look at this to say, okay, well, in the state of Utah alone, closed sales through the end of May is down 6%, meaning that there's been more than over 1,000, or about 1,200 less closed transactions this year through the end of May as there were last year. So just to give you some perspective on that, if you take let's say an average commission of $7,500, take 1,200 transactions times $7,500 transaction, that's $9 million of commissions more that were paid out last year than this year. So one thing to keep in mind with this, to give you some business perspective, is this: if there's $9 million less of commissions that have been paid out this year over last year, the average income of a real estate agent is, there's different statistics on this, but let's say less than $35,000 historically. If we just took $9 million out of that pool, and there's 25,000 real estate agents in the state of Utah, what's going to happen to a lot of those real estate agents over the next 12 to 18 months? They're going to be getting out of business. If our job just became harder, because now we don't just have to wait for people to call and say, hey, Cheryl, list my house. Now it's us taking the conversation to them and say, this is why you should potentially list your house. It takes more skill to be a great real estate agent in this type of market than it did 6 months ago. So the idea behind this is I'm not trying to create fear of, hey, your job just got harder. The opportunity just got greater. Because even that agent that's going to get out of business, say that they had only family and friends that were committed to use them because they didn't take the time to go to classes like this, like you are. They each have 20, 30 people that might be committed to them, that right now, if they get out of business, it means someone else is going to capture that business and pull it into their business. So some of the decisions we should be making right now is not only how do we create more instant business for ourselves, but how do I position myself in a way that I am going to be the realtor of choice and pick up that mind share as other agents are getting out of business.
Hey, Marcus.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just have a question from Robin. So she asked, what impact do you see new construction having on these trends, particularly where both active or sold is down, but pending is up, and new construction typically has longer pending time?
Great question. So we know, one of the things we know, and we'll talk a little bit about this in a few minutes, is we know that our population status in the state of Utah is increasing at a faster pace than it ever has before. And I anticipate that that's actually going to increase. We see a lot of these high population areas where as people get through this first round of COVID, depending on what that looks like, a lot of them are going to say, how do I get to a more rural area? I don't want to live around so many people. I think Utah is going to become even more attractive to people, and we're going to see an actual increase in the amount of people that are moving to Utah, where our net in-migration right now is like 42, 43%. I anticipate that's going to get over 50% based on this new trend of people migrating to the state of Utah. Well, that being the case is we've already, even before COVID, we had an inventory problem. In 2010, 2011, building permits tanked. Nobody was building, yet our population continued to increase. As soon as the market started to strengthen, builders started building as fast as they could, and we still have not closed the gap on how much new inventory, not just inventory in general, but new construction inventory is we were behind prior to COVID. So we're going to continue to see building going on. Yes, it's going to take a little bit long. It's going to create some delay in how quickly they can create product. And part of the problem with how quickly they can create product right now has to do with the price of ground is very, very high right now. Price of construction is very high right now. And then we have density problems. So there's a lot of cities that there's developers going in and saying, because the cost of the ground is so expensive, because the cost of construction is so expensive, I've got to increase density. I got to fit more units per acre to make this financially make sense. They're going to the city and saying, I need to increase density. And then the city's in a predicament because they're saying, we're open to increased density, but we don't have the infrastructure to support it. So from a city perspective, they're talking about how do we increase tracks? How do we increase public transportation? How do we increase schools? Because all those things have to be in place infrastructurally to support higher density. So that's kind of the predicament we're going to see with new construction is we know we need more inventory, and the cities know they've got to give it to some element around that density piece, but we've got to be looking at it from an infrastructure standpoint, if that helps. We'll continue to talk about that piece as we keep rolling here. Just checking real quick on comments. Robin, let me know if that helped with your question, and we'll touch on a couple other points that I think will help illustrate that as well. So let's keep rolling here on this. So if you look specifically now at new listings, and some of the stuff we're going to go through pretty quick through, but I'm going to share it with you in the slides so you can salivate over that data a little bit more. But one of the things to look at here is, again, the decrease in the number of closed units in May versus the May last year. I mean, just in May alone, about 1,300 less closed units, down 22.3% through May. Again, June, we closed the gap a little bit. July, we're continuing to close the gap. But again, there's that uncertainty of, are we going to look at another economic shutdown this fall? Days on the market, as would make sense, have decreased, meaning that if you have a properly priced home on the market that looks good, it's instantly gone. At the same time, all those other indicators are going down, but the average sales price is still increasing. We're up 1.9% across the state. Salt Lake County is even more so. That again, it's showing you that buyer demand has not decreased. In fact, one of the graphs I'll show you here in a few minutes is the number of mortgage applications is at an all-time high right now of people applying for mortgages. So this shows that we're going to continue to see that buyer demand at a very high level. We just need to create certainty for people that are looking to sell their home, that they've got a path of somewhere to go. This graph here, I mean, this makes perfect sense to us. The percent of original list price received right now is still very high. It's nearly 98%. As a lot of you guys know, in most of your scenario, or specific to our office, we're actually getting selling homes for a higher price than we're currently listing them, closer to like 106%, other than the market average of 97.8%. Which, if that is true for you, I would include this in my listing presentation. That right now across the board, the percent of original list price received is 97.8%. However, on my listings, if I was talking in your shoe and you were looking at your statistics, on my listings, we're consistently getting between 106 and 109% of list price because of our marketing strategy. Let's run that math on your specific house. You take 109% minus 98%, that's 11% more. And then you could do the math to show them how much more that gets them in their pocket. And that should be part of your layer of value proposition you're giving them. And specifically, that could be one of the strategies to help create the path for someone right now that wants to list their house, but they have uncertainty of, I might want to wait 6 months. I want to wait to see what the market does. Well, when supply starts to go up and catches up to demand, we're going to see those prices soften because we're overpriced to some element right now. So for them to net more money, it could make sense to rush in now with all the pent-up buyer demand. But again, these are the conversations we need to be creating. Let's look specifically at Salt Lake County through the end of May. New listings was down 18%, closed sales down 25% in May. Now think about a closed sale. Generally speaking, the work or the contract that created that closed sale from a real estate purchase contract was probably 45 days before. So if it was a sale recorded in May, it was probably a contract written in March, sometime in March, to get it closed in May. So that was at the very onset of uncertainty, where we've seen some of that close the gap, where we're going to see in June and July, it's closing the gap a little bit, but still far below where it needs to be. Percentage of units listed which sold. This is an interesting statistic right now, because right now the public's perception is either nobody's selling houses right now because of the world is in chaos, which we know is not true. We know that if a house comes on the market that is properly priced, it's instantly gone. But one of the things that would surprise them once we get them on board with how homes are selling right now, there is demand, is one thing to look at is only 84% of homes listed by a real estate professional are actually selling. So it's interesting to look at days on the market's down, things are going for nearly what they're listed for, but still, that means 16% of homes that are listed by real estate professionals are unsuccessfully selling in the most successful, fastest paced, highest demand real estate market we've ever seen. You can see historically, you know, if they're looking at like a 60%, 70%, that would be considered a healthy market. Right now we're at 84%, but helping them realize the people that are considering the low cost brokerage or considering for sale by owner is helping them understand, is that really a risk you're willing to take in the market? Not only in a time where there's a ton of buyer demand, which means a lot of buyers are being forced into a contract because they have a fear of losing out. They finally get under contract and they're like, what were we thinking? We don't need a house with 3 bedrooms. We need a house with 5 bedrooms. Well, we got caught up in the bidding war, right? So we see an increased number of contract fallout too, to help them understand, don't you want a real estate professional that's going to help you navigate this and make sure we get the right buyer in place that's going to close the property? And by the way, 16 out of 100 people that are listing their house in today's market are unsuccessful in selling their house because they don't choose the right professional. Let me walk you through today our strategy on how we're going to XYZ. This should also be a part of your listing presentation or listing consultation. So one of the things we're constantly looking at from a leadership playbook, our job as the leadership team is to stay out in front of you to say, are we providing the right tools, the right strategies that are winning in the marketplace? So number one, we're always comparing ourselves to us to look at it and say, how are we performing compared to how we performed last year? And then we're also comparing ourselves against our competitors to say, okay, if we are shifting our strategy, are we increasing the gap between us and our competitors? Is our strategy working? So we constantly are looking at what percentage of the market share do we own, and are we continuing to grow our market share? So this graph here shows specific to Salt Lake County by closed units. You can see that we continue to dominate in a very strong position at 12.2% market share. Our next competitor is Equity Real Estate, who they have significantly more agents doing way less transactions than us. And you can see kind of where all of our other competitors fall, or our major competitors. There's one thing on this graph that sticks out to me a little bit. It's easy to look at this and celebrate. We're at 12.2% market share, which is incredible. Just so you know, our goal is 20% market share, which we're committed to do, and we have the leadership team to do it and the agent base to do it. But 12.2% market share, that is awesome. One of the things I'm looking at on here that is a little concerning to me, and we're focusing on with our education program, is the percentage of green versus yellow that you're seeing on this graph. Green represents the number of homes we've listed and sold versus the buyer representations that we did. And you can see historically we've been a little bit higher on the green, almost a 50% list, a 50% buy side, and we see that shrinking just a little bit. So and you can see that's consistent with a lot of our competitors, except for one. You can see that Homey is almost primarily listing and only a small portion of a buy side. So one thing I will tell you now is I do not believe any brokerage, including the low cost brokerages like a Homey, an Open Door, or any of those other pieces, I know with a fact, without a shadow of a doubt, their value in representation for their clients does not even hold a light to what we bring to the table as a company and as individuals. The only reason that they're picking up listing share is because we're not creating the conversation enough. We're relying on them calling us to create the conversation. And going back to create the path is we need to make a concerted, purposeful effort in creating the conversation of value up front. And in doing so, there will be no choice because the value has already occurred. This is another way to look at it. We're constantly looking at what our market share did compared to our competitors, just looked at it a different way. And this is something we're constantly looking at. You can see that our market share in units actually decreased a little bit. And we've made a concerted effort, shifts in strategy, and you can see we're picking back up that market share that we lost in the first quarter of this year. I'm not going to dive into this. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, before you continue, we just have a couple of comments and question. So from Eric commented that the question to be asked and answered is, how do we increase walkable infrastructure? And we also have a question from Adrian. He asked, does that count refis? I think it's refinance.
Yeah,
and
great questions. I can see them now, so I'll address them here.
Okay.
So Eric, to your point, and thank you for this. I think this is actually a really important point right now, because I believe that we're actually going to see developments change. If you think historically over it, historically people built neighborhoods close to their neighborhood markets. They had the local coffee shop, they had the local bread shop. And then we moved away from that of saying, let's do bigger subdivisions that people drive 10, 15 minutes to a retail center that has all of their coffee shops, their bread shops, their grocery stores, the restaurants all clustered together. Well, one of the hottest items right now that is being sold is e-bikes. E-bikes, they're selling like hotcakes. If you want an e-bike, you've got to order one in advance right now. So I anticipate that part of this shift we're going to see is, I think we're going to see developments kind of going back to this idea of people don't want to get in their car and drive 15, 20 minutes to a huge retail center to pick their restaurant, walk into the grocery store. They want to hop on their bike and e-bike to their local coffee shop, e-bike to their local bread shop. Now we'll still have those bigger retail centers, but people are going to choose to stay more local than go out a little bit farther. Is my anticipation with we're going to see developments kind of working back towards that, which goes into the piece of walkable infrastructure. One of the graphs I'm going to show you today is in the iPhone, the Apple Maps function of showing you right now how many people are pulling data or directions for walking, public transportation, or driving compared to where it was before. So this is one interesting thing to look at of how much people are actually engaging back into the community, which we'll talk about. Adrian, to your point, the comment I was making around applications being up, the graph I'm going to show you is purely for acquisition, not refinance. So I'll touch on that again when we get to that graph. What was the 16% of FSBOs are failing? Is that what you said? So I don't have an exact percentage on FSBOs. The last statistic I have is 17%, but it's not accurate as of 2020. I couldn't find a current statistic for 2020. I anticipate that it's going to be very similar or close to that, but I do not have a 2020 numbers on the FSBOs. Great questions. Any other questions before we continue to move here? Is our pacing okay? I know I talk fast. I can't help it. I'm excited. Let's keep rolling. Oh, I got a clap from somebody. That's great. Okay, here we go. This graph here, we're not going to go over it, but I think it's important for you to have at your fingertips. A lot of people moving in the state of Utah. Granted, a lot of people are coming from outside of the state, but there's a lot of people moving county to county in the state of Utah as well. And it's not enough just to know your market or the Utah market. You've got to be able to talk to them in terms of the market they're coming from. So for example, someone coming from Tooele County is for you to understand, how has that market shifted in relation to Salt Lake County, which you can see here, it's actually been very close. But you should look at Weber County and say, how has that differed? What is the average price in Weber County versus Salt Lake County? What can people expect? What is the market they're used to? So this is a great little sheet that the UAR puts together for us that gives us that information. This graph is very similar to the one we looked at before, but from a volume standpoint, not just a unit standpoint, which I'll make sure that you guys have. And we continue to pick up even more market share by volume than units. Okay, I'm in the middle of a meeting. I love you. I'll come see you in a little bit, okay? Sorry, my daughter's over here spinning on my chair. So let's go back and talk about supply and demand for a minute. I've given you a snapshot of what's happening in the market statistically, but now let's start talking about what we can anticipate happening with both supply and demand. Because it's being able to talk about what's happened in the market is there's a lot of value to that. But where we can help create the path is no one needs help creating a path backwards. They need to help creating a path forwards. So the statistics we just talked about help them get clarity on their current reality or where they're at in the path. Now we need to take that and say, in relation to supply and demand, how do we create a path moving forward, or making some anticipations around what's going to happen in the marketplace? And that has to be not some general statements, but specific to the client, which we'll talk through. So supply and demand, they don't move at the same pace. Which one is going to move first? Let's talk about demand for a few minutes. So here's a list of items that affect demand. Unemployment. If unemployment continues to go up and people don't have jobs, they become unlendable. If more people are unlendable, buyer demand is naturally going to go down. Job growth. If we don't continue to create jobs to help people get back into to employment, buyer demand would go down. Affordability. If affordability goes in the wrong direction, and at some point people will be like, this has just got too crazy, I'm pulling out, that could affect buyer demand. Population growth, consumer spending. So let's walk through a couple of these items in a little bit more detail. Housing affordability. You guys know I love to talk about affordability because too many people make blanket statements about the affordability of our marketplace, but they only take one of the three things that affect affordability into consideration. For example, one of the most common comments we're getting right now is, oh my gosh, everything's so overpriced. Everything's too expensive. I remember my dad bought a house in 1980 for $35,000 and now they want $420,000? No way, right? But they're only looking at one piece of affordability. There's three pieces to affordability: median income, median price of home, and interest rates. So real quickly, looking at this graph here, it gives you the housing affordability index. Now keep in mind, a housing affordability index of exactly 100 would suggest that we're in a perfectly affordable market. A perfectly affordable market would suggest that 30% of the median income is exactly what you need to make a payment on a median priced homes at current interest rates. So it's interesting here, in October of 2019, we became technically an unaffordable market at 105, then 102, and we're slowly dropping back down to where our current affordability is 98. We've actually dropped below, even though prices are going up, prices are the highest they've ever been, we've actually become a more affordable market than we were a month ago or 2 months ago. And this is why. Let's talk about 2 and 3, but come back to number 1. Number 2, median price of home. We know that that's gone up. We know that the buyer demand is there, that granted, if any of these other things change significantly, our prices are gonna stay pretty close to where they are. There might be a little bit of a softening or a little bit of a dip, but they're going to stay strong. Interest rates. A year ago, I told you, I do not anticipate interest rates getting any lower than they are. I can't fathom it. And here we are. I was wrong. Interest rates are so incredibly low right now. The interesting thing is the thing the thing that I feel like we have most uncertainty about is what is going to happen to median income, which right now, before COVID, the median income was finally catching up in the state of Utah because of the type of jobs we were attracting to the state. These high-tech, Silicon Slope type jobs, the net in-migration, salaries were finally going up in the state of Utah. Well, there's a piece of uncertainty we have right now around median income. One, what is going to happen with unemployment? So, and I'll show you some graphs on unemployment here in a second, but if a lot of these people were able to retain their jobs, was it strictly because of the PPP loans that are now running out of funds, and the employers no longer have to keep the employees to qualify for the funds, and we're going to see people drop off? There's some uncertainty around that we'll kind of talk about here in a second. We know that
Hey, Marcus,
yep.
real quick. So one of the things that I see is that I believe that we haven't seen the migration numbers where I think they're going to go. I think that migration numbers are going to actually go up. I do believe that the inventory is going to remain where we are going to have a problem with the amount of supply, because I can't see any reason down the road other than the people who cannot afford their home that they'll go into an REO situation. But I believe I see even that with the people who currently live here or the people that are migrating, with the investment opportunities that come with that, I see that is going to actually stable off our economy. I think the biggest, and if you look at job loss, it's all been the lower paying jobs. We haven't seen a lot of the higher paying jobs, people losing their income. The other thing is that when you talk about the Silicon Slopes and those things, I do see where in the San Jose area in California, I can see them moving and shifting their people this way, where it is a lot more affordable. There's space for them to grow. I believe the biggest caveat to all of this is what happens to interest rates.
Yep. And we know interest rates have to go up at some point.
Correct.
Is it likely to happen in the near future? Probably not. But it will happen at some point. One of the points you bring up, Joe, that I think is really interesting is there's a lot of people talking about if unemployment continues to increase, people aren't getting rehired, they're not going back to work. They're talking about a huge influx of REOs. Well, the difference between 2008 and 2009, when we saw a huge increase in REOs and foreclosures, was the net equity of homeowners was negative. Where right now, the net equity of homeowners is actually not only positive, but very strongly positive. Meaning that if someone gets in a bind, for the most part, because buyer demand is so high, end user buyer demand, which is different than investor demand, is so high that they can likely get out of a bad situation very quickly.
And they'll swallow up all the inventory.
Yeah. So let's talk about unemployment for a minute. It's interesting to look at Utah. Our unemployment rate is 5.1% as of June, and it sounds so high compared to what we were at, but compared to the U.S. at 11.1%. Job growth rates in the state of Utah we led the nation with the fastest job growth of negative 2.8%. To give you some clarification around that, Utah and Idaho and Nevada have kind of been jogging for the #1 spot for years, and consistently around about a 3% or 3.3% job growth year over year. And we've pulled back on that to a negative 2.8, still the strongest in the country, but losing jobs. We're going to start seeing that come back, but as the U.S., negative 8.7%. I've included some other data here that you guys can digest over a little bit after this. But one thing I wanted to look at is this is a long-term graph of unemployment. And you can see the green line here of Salt Lake County has just historically been so low for the last really decade. It's been very, very low. And the thing I wanted to point out here, as of end of May, we saw a huge spike, and we already saw that start to decline. A lot of experts are saying that we saw that spike. We're going to see a sharp decline and then a really tapered out that's going to take almost a decade to catch up and get back to these lows of 2.2, 2.4%. So we can't anticipate that just because we see a spike down here, that's instantly going to drop all the way down to that 2.2, 2.5%. It's going to hit a certain point and then it's going to taper out. A lot of that is going to be in anticipation of what happens with the federal stimulus packages. For example, there are several people that I've heard of that have been offered a job to come back to work, but they're choosing not to go because they're making more on unemployment with the extra stimulus package than they were making in their job, which this is the problem. If people are choosing to stay on unemployment because they're making more money, then having the opportunity to go back and stimulate our economy could be a major problem for us, right? Now, at some point, that stimulus package, I'm hoping, will go away and will encourage people to get back to work and help continue to drop that down. But you can see again, compared to the rest of the country, we're doing much better. Interest rates. So right now, interest rates are at 3.16% on average across the country. So if I was standing outside of Maverick right now and asked the question to the general public, are interest rates high or low right now? Across the board, most people would say, oh, interest rates are low right now, right? That's common knowledge right now. But what people don't understand is, how does that apply to me? What does that mean for me? This is part of the conversation that we've got to get good at. And one of the things I talked about in the last quarterly market update, and just a quick reminder, we're not going to walk through it in as much detail, but we need to be able to walk somebody through the process of saying, if someone makes the argument, I'm just going to wait a year because I think prices are going to go down. Well, I think we have enough data here to show that prices are not going to go down much, if at all. But us telling somebody you're wrong, prices are not going to go down, they instantly go into defense mode. Like, don't tell me I'm wrong. I don't want to hear that. But if we were to ask a better question to say, well, I want to show you some data today that might contradict that, but just out of curiosity, if the market does go down, what percentage do you think would be the max that would go down? And most people say 5%, 8%, or even up to 10% decrease in the market. Well, at the median price, say $400,000, that's $40,000 saving, which in their mind sounds like a lot. But there is a chance that interest rates will be higher in a year, even so. You got to be able to run them through the model of, okay, what if we bought today, or let's say we bought in a year at higher interest rates versus today at higher price, lower interest rate. Which one is a better deal long term? Where realistically for that person, it makes more sense to buy today at a higher price at lower interest rates than wait a year and buy it at a 10% discount at higher interest rates. So just being able to walk them through that process and saying, let's run the numbers. Don't let me just tell you you're wrong. Let's run the numbers and explore if you're right. If you don't know how to have this conversation, this is something that you need to learn. If it's something that you feel like you need someone to model it for you, I'd be happy to do another Zoom call where I model the whole conversation with the client and role play it for you. But this is a much different conversation than telling someone like, I don't think you're right. I'm the expert. You're not the expert. Other than saying, let's work this out together. Let's clear the path together. And if all of a sudden the light bulbs are going off for them to be like, we got to go look at houses before interest rates go up because it's going to save me money in the long term, is different than you telling them that that's what they need to do. So here's a couple other graphs that I think are interesting that have to do with demand. U.S. air travel. So it's interesting to start to see people posting on Facebook again that they're traveling places, but don't get fooled that air traffic is back up to its normal amount. Year over year change in daily travels passing through TSA is still almost 80% down from where it was a year ago. So this is going to be interesting to see what the stimulus package or bailout packages looks like for airlines, which airlines get saved, which ones do not. But this is a big driver of our economy is tourism, right? Think about Utah. Yes, there's more and more people coming here to live, but most people that are migrating to Utah first came here to vacation, fell in love with it from the skiing, the outdoor, the hiking, and then they choose to make it home. But if people aren't coming to visit, could that affect our economy, both from people moving here and just the increased amount of restaurants and things like that? Changing requests for directions on Apple Maps. This one is measured over the previous 7 days. So this is a 7-day average, not from the previous year. But interesting, you can see transit is still very low. People are avoiding public transportation, which again, this could be a problem for us because from an infrastructure standpoint, for us to increase density, people got to start using better and more public transportation. So this will be interesting to watch. You can see more people are looking up walking directions, driving directions, but still, even though this is showing above 0%, it's a 7-day average, the number of requests going into Apple Maps is significantly lower than it was pre-COVID. So less people are going out and doing specific things where they need directions. This is the one that I was talking about earlier, and Adrian, to your point, this is a graph of year over year change in mortgage applications for purchasing a single family home. So don't get confused by the title of this graph being U.S. home purchases, because this isn't measuring the actual purchases. This is measuring the number of mortgage applications for purchasing. This does not include refinance. This is purely people looking to buy a home right now. And we're at an all-time high of people looking for, applying, not just looking for, but actually going through the process of applying for a home loan. So can we anticipate that buyer demand is going to stay strong based on the number of people that are applying for homes? There's enough buyers that still see a path. They still see a path that I need to buy a home. The people that are not seeing the path clearly are the people that are controlling the inventory. The people in a current house where they have fear about saying, I can sell this house and get into another house. Or I can sell this house and downgrade. I can sell this house and upgrade. I can sell this house and move to Florida. They need help seeing that opportunity. Hotel occupancy rates at 40%. US restaurant bookings down 65%. So a lot of those things are, I know they're not specifically real estate related, but they show you some things that are going on about the uncertainty in the marketplace. We just got done talking about things that could affect demand. Let's talk for a few minutes around supply. All those things, unemployment, population growth, median sales price, median income. None of us can wake up tomorrow and say, I'm going to affect the median income in the state of Utah. I'm going to do the world a favor and I'm going to take the median income in the state of Utah from 60,000 to 120,000. If I could do it, I would. But we don't have that control. But what we do have control over is we can actually go out and create supply by creating better conversations with our people. So what are the things that are going to affect supply right now? Number one is new listings. There are a lot of people out there that once they see their path will need to list their house. Once they understand that buyer demand is there, that they're going to get a very competitive, more than fair price for their home, could help instigate them and move them towards selling their house if it gets them closer to where they want to go. We talked a little bit about new construction. This is something we know that we're still behind on inventory for new construction. We still see a lot of construction going on. Some of the things that are going to be interesting to watch with new construction is how easy is it to get supplies now that the importing business has, a lot of things have been put on hold from an import standpoint. What can be built in the US, and is there a cost difference in the materials by it being produced in the US? Could this affect the cost of construction to even go up more than it is? We're gonna watch and learn about this. The other piece that's gonna affect supply right now is a lot of homes coming to the market historically have been people downsizing and going into retirement homes. Well, the number of people moving into retirement homes right now is significantly decreased due to COVID scare of being in a condensed place with more at-risk people. So there's several people that are waiting to see, is it possible for me to downsize and move into a smaller community or a retirement home? So this is affecting our supply. And the other piece of this that's affecting our supply is we know that 33% of all homes sold last year were first-time home buyers. And there is some sticker shock going on with millennials right now of like, I can't even imagine spending that much money. I just went through 4 years of school, took on $150,000 of debt to get a $60,000 a year, a $55,000 a year job, or they feel like there isn't an opportunity for job. How can I afford a $400,000 home? So these are some things that are going into the equation of that is their reality. And for some people, that might be a true reality, but is that a false reality for some people? The point with this is how do we go have more and better conversations with people? The more people you talk to, not everybody is going to need a transaction this year, but the more people we talk to, we will find more people that need our help in this moment, and they're just waiting for someone to clear the path. And here's the truth. If you're not willing to do it, somebody else will. Somebody else will eat up market share for the rest of this year. The question is, will it be you? I'm confident that it will be us because nobody else in the state is having these conversations right now. The majority of our competitors, I rub shoulders with a lot of other brokerage owners, and we are very cordial. We talk to each other. Their playbook right now is do more of the old. Just do more of the old activity. Where our comment is, hey, we're shifting gears. The conversations look different. The needs of the clients look different. The way we approach a client looks different. The way we're supported through a transaction and delivering customer service through technology looks different. All of those things are a critical piece of why we continue to pick up market share while our competitors do not. I want to make a couple quick comments around the commercial real estate space. Even though I know the majority of us focus on residential, it's important for us to understand what's going on in the commercial world. A couple things to consider here, and these are more points of thought than me giving a clear, concise answer, because there is some real uncertainty around this. Retail. How is retail going to rebound? We know that right now, as of right now, consumer spending is still fairly high. It really hasn't dropped that much, but the shift from actual in-store transactions to online transactions has increased even more than it has before. So the question is will some of these stores survive even when the PPP loans run out? Will they survive and be able to keep an actual in-store retail location at such high prices for those retail locations, particularly those high-end? I live right next to Station Park in Farmington. Those high-end, high-rent areas, it's going to be interesting to see how those play out. Industrial. This is going to be an interesting play with industrial space. I believe that there's going to be an actual increased demand in industrial space because a lot of companies are now saying, hey, we need to get away from relying on imported materials, where historically the US went through a transitional period where why would we want to do this in-house? Let's send it all overseas. And it's created some problems for us where we need to get back to creating more warehouse type jobs here locally. And if more and more people are shopping online, we need more staging warehouse where we can process those orders. So I anticipate that we're going to see an actual increase in demand for industrial space. And we'll see actually some retail space being converted to industrial. Office space. This has been one of the biggest shifts through COVID, is how people view and need office space. We've all learned to work virtually at a much higher level. I even think of that older generation of even grandparents that 6 months ago, if you would have said like, I want to FaceTime or I want to Zoom with your grandkids, they would be like offended by it. Like, no way am I going to do that. That sounds too hard. It sounds too difficult. And now I have my kids' grandparents are happy to meet with them virtually and talk to them, and they feel like they're connecting. More and more people, if I would have offered to do the quarterly market update purely virtually, our attendance would have been lower, where here we are with several of you in a class virtually to have the same experience you would locally. So the idea of how office space is going to be change over time or through this pandemic is we're going to see smaller office spaces, more concise, more WeWork space, which is very similar to what we're building in our new office space of a very high energy, very usable area. But some of the, like Fidelity, for example, one of the biggest investment bankers, they had a huge hundreds of $million project in New York. They fully canceled it and said, all of our people are liking working from home. We're just going to keep going down this route. So we're going to continue to see that office piece move. Multifamily. This is one that has baffled me actually over the last couple of years. This high-end multifamily, I felt like it was being overbuilt, where people are paying $1,500, $1,800 a month rent when they could go buy a house for less than that. But they've chosen to live in these communities for no maintenance, nice finishes. They got a covered garage. The question is how many people are going to feel unsafe living in a high dense type community, particularly if COVID is the first of many pandemics, right? We don't know what that looks like, but that's something to look at from a multifamily standpoint, is what's gonna happen with demand for that type of product, particularly where there's still thousands of units for this type of product being built across the country right now. Is at some point will that balance out and people will migrate out of that back to single family homes. Something I've got my eye on because I invest in and build multifamily. I focus on smaller, duplex, fourplex, sixplex type communities. But so I've watched this community, but it's something that's on my radar. So to wrap up our discussion, then we can open it up for questions, is going back to this idea of certainty versus uncertainty. We've talked a lot about your clients living in a place of uncertainty. I want to flip the script for a minute and ask you as an agent and a business owner, where do you live right now as an agent? Do you live in uncertainty as an agent? And if you do, I would encourage you to study these numbers, spend time understanding them, make sure you're plugging into the classes that we're providing, both virtually and in the office, because if you're going to give certainty to someone, you cannot do that from a place of uncertainty. If you walk into an appointment where you're like, I'm scared, I don't know what's going to happen, I don't know how to do this in this market, whether your words match that feeling or not, if you're feeling that way, your clients are going to feel that. So the very first step here is, how do you get certainty? And you started the process today by being here. We're going to send out these slides. I'd encourage you to connect with other people on this call, other people in the office, script and role play around this. So the first time you get in front of your client, that's not the first time you're practicing these conversations, but do less telling, ask better questions. Ask better questions and listen and say, where does this person want to go? And what do I provide from a real estate transaction or other on how to get them to where they want to go? Any questions or comments for me? Or things that you want to chat about before we wrap up our discussion?
Marcus?
Yes.
Hey, it's Joe. So, hey, so it's funny you say that, like that whole thing. It's interesting when you were talking about kind of that Venn diagram, right? You got certainty and uncertainty. Well, I've noticed, at the very beginning of this, I was definitely in a huge uncertain position. Where do we go? What's happening, right? And I also think most people, when they see that, I go, oh, well, where am I going to be? Obviously, if you can be in the middle section where you're talking about growth and opportunity, that's a much better headspace. And and it's a positive thing. I think people, because of, there's stress involved with what's going on right now. So people are vacillating, right? I think in general, people are like, one day it's like, oh, I feel this is a great growth, and then all of a sudden you feel like this. So that's kind of a normal thing, but I think taking that inventory of where you are and being cognizant of that is, and what you said, how that affects your clients, that is, if you don't know where you are, if you can't recognize, hey, today I'm feeling this way, and try to get yourself back to that middle portion of opportunity and growth, that's paramount in this business. And there'll be more deals done or not done based upon where you are in that continuum.
Beautifully said. So your homework assignment is we got to go tell the story. How do we tell that story? One is, nothing will ever beat a voice-to-voice conversation. One of the things I always encourage you to do is a Facebook Live that sounds something like this. Hey, I spent a couple hours today with some of the top agents in our industry, masterminding around the state of the market and the direction of our economy. I learned a lot of incredible things that I think are relevant to you and your home. If any of you would like a one-on-one conversation of what's going on in the economy and the Utah market, message me below. Very simple. The other thing is that we've built for you, if any of you are interested in it, we've built a marketing piece that we can customize to you that shows some of the stats of the market, that shows you as the market expert, that could generate a follow-up conversation with your people. Again, nothing will beat a face-to-face conversation, but also having a data piece built for you, customized to you, that shows you as the market would help. Tanya Mosgrove, my partner in ExecAssist, just posted the link there at execassist.me/shop. Just click on that. I think we do it for cost. I think it's like $15 if you want it customized to you. You can click on it there and see what that looks like. If not, you can go into Command and build it yourself. But it's important for us to get this message out. Any other last comments or questions for me? Okay, thank you guys so much. It's an exciting time. Let's go out and do the work. You guys did the right thing by being here today and learning and growing. Know we're here to support you any way we can. Let's go out and pick up mind share and market share. Proud of you guys.
Good job. Thanks, Marcus.
Thanks, Marcus.
Thank you.